Welcome back to A Defense of the Awkward Moment, joined again by Michael Zupon. I want to talk today about the Lost Mines of Phandelver. It is a module for D&D 5th edition. It came with the D&D 5th Ed starter kit. Just got finished rolling through that module with a group of 4 other players. The first campaign that I've DM'd probably since AD&D.
Good while then.
Yeah, quite a while since I've DM'd.
You skipped 3, 3, 5, 4, and now 5.
Yeah. That having been said, really easy to get back into. You know that once we will quietly draw a veil over Thaco. I really easy to get back into. The mechanics in 5 were a whole lot easier to manage.
D20 was so much better than Thaco.
Yeah, good. Good module overall. Designed for character levels 1 through 5, though legitimately playing through the adventure level, being level 5 by the time you enter into the final zone of the module is kind of a stretch unless you play the thing through from end to end. Good story setup for the module. Good clean story setup. At this point now I've at least dipped my toes in a number of the 5th Ed modules. This one, Horde of the Dragon Queen, the Storm King's Thunder, and the setup for this one, you know, obviously with it being included with the starters kit, the setup for this module was really clean. You know, you're a group of people, a group of mercenaries that are guarding a wagon load of supplies going from point A to point B, and the story takes off from there.
Bad things happen.
Yeah, bad things happen. Makes it really easy to really easy to get into it. You know, there's a lot of stress that sometimes goes into building modules and campaigns where you've got a story and you know where it starts, but you know then there's the building of custom characters and trying to figure out how your backgrounds all interface and this and that and the other, and this really kind of paves over a lot of that for you.
Especially if you use the pre-created characters.
Yes, if you do use the pre-created characters, and some of the folks, some of the people that we played with were pre-created. I know the cleric was pre-created. At least the cleric was. I honestly can't remember if the other ones were pre-gen. I don't think the bard was.
No,
I don't think the ranger
he's too
was
weird.
But the cleric was definitely a cousin of one of the main NPCs, the main NPC in the whole game. Overall, not a horrible adventure so far. You've played through a lot of these, a lot of the 5th Ed adventures so far. I think probably more than I have.
Well, we did. We tried Horde of the Dragon Queen, and then we did Curse of Strahd, and then this one. So it's much cheerier.
That's because Ravenloft is where people go to die.
Well, and you know, Horde of the Dragon Queen, you tried to play through that thing. That's a nightmare draped in a ghost story. It's just there's no escaping the failure of that place.
We're working through in another campaign that I'm playing in right now. We're working through Horde of the Dragon Queen, and I think we're in the second part of it. Now, and it's definitely had its ups and downs. You know, one of the problems that we've seen in the 5th Ed modules that we've been playing so far has been the balancing of combat, and I don't know if that's a problem with the modules or if it's a problem with 5th Ed in general. The balancing of combat is either a rofl stomping on the DM side or a rofl stomping on the player side.
Mm-hmm.
I have rarely, but on occasion, seen well balanced fights where you had to throw a few spells and you might maybe have had to use a few of your abilities, but it wasn't one of those things where we have a knockdown drag-on fight, which is a random encounter, and then we all need a long rest when everything is said and done to get all of our abilities back. It really feels like balancing combat in 5th Ed is a huge problem.
I haven't tried to DM it, but I don't know about the random encounters because that's the kind of stuff that, you know, you're looking at the DM's guide when things come up. But Horde of the Dragon Queen, the first major enemy you run into, you might be level 2 when you meet him, but he's at least a level 5 half dragon.
Oh,
which isn't even a dragonborn. It's a half dragon, which is bigger and badder and nastier in every way than a dragonborn. And he challenges one of your people to single combat. And it's not even close.
Nope.
no matter what. I mean, he's level 5 at least, so he starts off with 2 greatsword attacks, and if there's anything still standing, he breathes on it. And then, okay, yeah, that was not fun. And either before or depending on how you play the adventure, his big brother, the adult blue dragon, is flying around, and you could accidentally run into his breath weapon. And when you're playing a cleric in full armor that doesn't have much of a dex save, that doesn't work out well for you either. I mean,
the Horde of the Dragon Queen is pretty renowned online in a lot of player forums for the first act of it just being absolutely brutal.
Yeah,
absolutely brutal. And the Storm King's Thunder, there's some pretty rough sections. There's some pretty rough sections in there as well. I don't even think we made it halfway through the Storm King's Thunder, and we had total party wiped 3 times.
Yeah, that's no fun.
It's really, really not. And that's the tough thing.
If you're playing Paranoia, yeah, it's fun. If you're playing D&D, it's not so much fun.
It's a tough thing. It's a tough tightrope to walk as a DM, because on one hand, you don't want it to be just a complete and total walk in the park. Otherwise, there's no stress, there's no tension, there's no high energy for your players. And on the other hand, nobody wants to play the game at all if people aren't having fun.
Yeah.
And that's always been one of the great balancing acts for DMs everywhere. But the combat, and you talk about the random encounters. One of the things that was actually really good about the Phandelver module is that the random encounters in the Phandelver module are actually all mapped out for you in each of the individual sections. You're given a table, and of course you can go away from it if you're an experienced DM or if you're just a sadist. But the random encounters are all written out. They're all very, very well done. One roll for the day, one roll for the night, and if you score a particular number on your D20 roll, then you can roll another die to determine what monster you run into, and another roll of the die to determine how many monsters you run into. And for the most part, it's relatively well geared.
You run into 7 owlbears. That would be bad.
Yeah, and it's and the random encounters, they're actually really well structured. There's no way you can run into 7 owlbears.
Oh, good.
It's just a owlbear.
I don't have that many chests to wear skulls upon.
Indeed. But you can scale the rando encounters up or down depending on if you're playing with 3 people, 4 people, or 5 people. The module Phandelver, to get back on track here, it's designed for 3 to 5 people. We were playing with 4. We had a cleric. We had a life domain cleric. We had a valor. We had a valor bard.
We had a discretion bard.
We did have a discretion bard. All shit giving aside, the bard.
He did his job.
Yeah,
but he's not a valor bard. He should have just gone lore bard and been happy with it.
We had a ranger that went sharpshooter and Colossus Slayer, and then
brutal DPS.
Ugly.
Amazing amounts of damage.
And then we had our barbarian.
Dorvor.
Dorvor
the barbarian. The
Totem,
meat shield.
Totem of the bear. Elected to go sword and board.
Unkillable.
Instead of great weapon. Which I've talked to a bunch of people about that now, and every single time the subject of a barbarian going sword and board instead of great weapon comes up, they all kind of turn their head a little bit and like, I've never heard of a barbarian going sword and board. Well, now you have.
And it's a good idea.
Yeah, for anybody who's curious, barbarians going sword and board and Totem of the Bear, by the time they're level 4...
They don't believe in damage.
It's very, very difficult, especially if you use your rages strategically. They're very, very difficult to kill.
Damage is something that happens to other people.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
For.
Good balanced party though. When you went through Phandelver, this module, overall just a good adventure. Admittedly, full disclosure here, we probably only ran through about half the content in the module, which is one of the...
That was not Dorvor's fault. Dorvor was not there when people made bad decisions.
This is true. It is one of the failing points of the adventure. One of maybe the only negative things that I have to say about the module. If you are a DM, you will definitely want to thoroughly read ahead in what's going on. There are absolutely ways to circumvent without spoiling anything here. There are several key moments in every chapter, and there are four major chapters in the Phandelver module. There are ways to circumvent a lot of stuff in every major chapter of the module, and we'll come back here towards the end of the video and discuss where some of those loopholes are. But
between Dorvor and Pee Pants, we found the back door to everywhere.
It's true. We had a ranger who was it Primeval Sense.
Yes. Whatever she did.
Yeah, we had a ranger use Primeval Sense a couple of times, and to add a little bit of flavor, this isn't strictly by the book. There were for the people that are watching that aren't familiar with the ability, Primeval Sense is I think a level 1 spell, or an ability that uses a level 1 spell slot, and Rangers can use it, and it basically tells them if there's any number of critters, any number of particular types of critters in the area, undead, abominations, dragons,
abnormal things,
etc.
big scaries.
And God love her, the ranger in our party kept on insisting on using this at several points in the game where the area was just up to here with bad things, and
we overloaded her spider sense.
Yeah, we overloaded her spider sense. There were con rolls because I'm a little bit of a sadist, and enjoy the story and the drama aspects of being a DM. So there were con rolls. Which actually is one of the kind of the neat things about this module that I really enjoyed. As a DM, there was lots of opportunity here for embellishment. And again, we'll talk about specific areas here in a little bit once we hoist the spoiler flag. Design for levels 1 through 5. There are 4 main chapters in the module, and the module is very, very clear. One of the things that's neat about 5th Ed that I actually kind of enjoy, it leans far less heavily on XP if you're running through a module and not a homebrew adventure. 5th Ed leans far less heavily on XP and far more on milestones. And once you've gotten here in the game, you will have amassed through combat or through roleplay or through something else, you will have amassed enough experience that you should be, level 2 or you should be level 3. The final chapter in the game, for the DMs out there that are considering playing it, it's very, very difficult to justify by the numbers having a party of level 5 people by the time you get to the final chapter in the game.
Now, do they consider the final chapter Thunder Tree or the Mines?
They consider the final chapter the Mines.
Okay.
And
once again, we did it out of order.
Yes, there was much out of order. Well, I mean, no, we didn't. We didn't really do it out of order, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a minute. Magical weapons is another big problem that 5th Ed has had. And Phandelver actually has quite a few opportunities to find magical weapons, magical items, period. Thunder Tree. Now you've got me thinking about that. The Storm King's Thunder is another. It's a big module. Don't recommend wandering through the Storm King's Thunder if you're a rookie at this, or even if you want to have fun. Storm King's Thunder is a big module, but not having magical weapons was a pretty big deal. In that, and the Lost Mines of Phandelver doesn't really have that problem. There's several different opportunities at various easy stages throughout the campaign where people can find their way into magical weapons that are appropriate for their level. So it's good that that's not an issue. There are definitely several points in the campaign. By the time you get to the final chapter, if your folks don't have magical weapons, as a DM, you might want to wiggle your fingers a little bit. There are some things in the last part of the game that they're going to struggle with if they don't have magical weapons. All of that now having been said, for anybody who hasn't played the campaign yet and isn't interested in spoilers, you should probably look away, because now we're going to go start talking about the campaign in a little bit more detail.
Cover your eyes.
Cover your eyes. Cover your ears.
Look away, child.
Yeah, we talked about being able to sidestep some of the things in the adventure if you don't play it properly. There are huge pieces of this adventure that we didn't play because there are some critical points in the first part of the game and in the second part of the game and in the fourth part of the game where if you do things a certain way, you can sidestep all of it.
So what are the 4 sections?
The first section of the game is
the bandits,
the goblins of the many arrow tribe, or the goblins and arrows, I think is the name of the first chapter.
So I didn't play that one with you.
No,
guys.
you didn't play that.
Okay.
The first chapter involves finding the initial ambush site for Gundren Rockseeker. Story of the game is you're asked to escort a caravan or a wagon full of goods for this dwarf called Gundren Rockseeker from point A to point B, from Neverwinter to Phandelver, the name of this town to the south. And while escorting the wagon along, you find that there's been an ambush and Gundren's been taken, and yada yada yada. Part 1 is basically tracking the goblins that ambush Gundren to their hideout, clearing out the hideout, and returning Gundren, or
not Gundren.
Yeah, trying to find Gundren and return him and the companion that he's traveling with.
Oh, that guy.
to Phandalin, Sildar Hallwinter.
Sildar,
was his
yes.
name. So part 1 is clearing out the goblin hideout. Depending on how you do part 1, it then leans into the second part of the adventure, which is when you finally get to Phandalin, you discover that the town is overrun with bandits, the Red Brands.
That's their name.
And depending on how you choose to, and there are lots of different things to do once you get to Phandalin, one of which, and all of the things that you do will eventually lead you towards dealing with the bandits.
You can only put up with them for so long.
Yeah, you can only put up with them for so long because the story hook will eventually lead you back there. And this is another thing. It was just a good thing about the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Other modules, some of them can wander. Horde of the Dragon Queen, I'm told, is relatively on rails. I've talked to several people about it, and it's relatively on rails. Phandelver, there are several points in both parts 2 and 3 of the module where you can wander around and do various side quests and get a little bit of additional experience and possibly run into some magical weapons. But this is where you get into some of the shortcomings of the adventure. If you do 1 or 2 things wrong in part 1 and in the beginning of part 2, it streamlines the adventure to where logically it does not make sense unless the DM takes some serious liberties. It does not make sense for you to do anything other than proceed right down the train tracks through parts 2 and 3 in order to get to the Lost Mine in part 4. And if you do that, there's no way that you can justify level 5 characters when you enter into the mine. And again, spoilers here.
You want to be level 5.
You want to be level 5 when you go into the mine. The final
dangerous.
Yeah, the final fight against the main boss. It was a drow spellcaster, a level 5 drow spellcaster, a wizard, 4 giant spiders, a doppelganger, and a handful of bugbears.
Yes. Dorvor was not afraid.
4 or 5 players who are level 4. As the DM, I think that fight went relatively evenly across the board. Some of my rolls were good. Some of my rolls were bad. I absolutely think I would have buried you guys.
If we weren't level 5.
If you weren't level 5.
With some magic.
I still dropped 2 of you.
Yes.
At level 5. And that's when, that's without considering that there are other things in the mine. All of the conversation with the Black Spider, who is that drow spellcaster, was ad-libbed.
Sure.
There's a lot of room if you are a storyteller, if you enjoy running your mouth, if you enjoy building a good yarn, making your people think. There's a lot of room for that in Phandelver, both with the Black Spider and with another encounter in Thunder Tree in the third part of the game, which we'll get to. But there's a lot of horrible shit. The final fight with the Black Spider in the caves, that's supposed to be the end of the campaign. It completely glosses over the fact that there's a spectator hanging out in the mines, which actually has a higher challenge rating than the Black Spider does,
and the Spectre King or whatever that thing was.
There's a Wraith. Mormesk, the Wraith, who is also a higher challenge rating than the Drow, and there is another. It was a Flame Skull. Hanging out, who also had who could cast as level 3 spells. And there were several ghouls that would have popped up with the Flame Skull had you guys chosen to engage him, and you didn't. That's a lot of firepower.
It's because he wasn't sitting on top of a shiny breastplate.
Yeah, it's because he wasn't sitting on top of a shiny breastplate. That's a lot of firepower for level 4 characters, even 5 of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of be aware if you're a DM and you're running this campaign, and people go into the mines and they're not level 5.
He's trouble.
You're either going to have to fudge some of your rolls, or you're going to have to dial back some of the combat or something, because that's a lot of hate. It really, really is.
Pun intended.
Indeed, pun intended. One of the ways where we went off the rails in chapter 2, you come back from clearing out the goblin hideout, and there's meant to be all kinds of crazy shit that you can do before you have to confront the red brands.
What exactly did the party do that banished all of the side quests?
Well, in the very first part of the game, what happens is you find the ambush, and logically what people do is they park the wagon someplace. They park the wagon full of supplies someplace. You go, you clear the goblin hideout out. You find Sildar, and Sildar walks you back to Phandelver under a controlled environment.
Right.
What our party chose to do was find the ambush, find the wagons, finish delivering the supplies to Phandelver. And for those people watching, I'm not goofing the name. The city is Phandelver. The lost mines are the lost mines of Phandelver. I have no idea why they chose to do that.
They were big fans.
Indeed, I see what you did there.
I did that all over your person.
So if you what they did is they took the supplies to Phandelver, and when they were in Phandelver, they got into a tussle early with the red brands, and may or may not have set a building on fire when they did that.
Who was setting fires?
Before we swapped you in,
Yes.
in chapter 2, we had a wizard who liked to set shit on fire.
The pyromaniac wizards.
That actually had some fairly far-reaching effects in the adventure. He did some pretty horrible shit to goblins with fire, and as a result, your reputation preceded you for a lot of the adventure. But because you had already gotten into a scrap with the red brands before you were finally ordered back out of town to go find the guy who was ambushed, and that's important.
Right.
By the time you find Sildar Hallwinter inside of the goblin cave and bring everybody back to town, the whole town is on high alert. So when chapter 2 starts, all of these options that you're supposed to have about exploring the town and the area and talking to people, those are all done. The whole town is on high alert. The red brands are already looking for you, so you have to proceed directly to the encounter at the end of chapter 2.
I see. There was no tombstone-like slow build-up. It was they burned their bridges literally.
Yes.
And an inn.
Quite literally. Now we get to the red brands hideout. You're supposed to go through the red brands hideout through the top of the mansion that the hideout is sitting beneath. Y'all didn't do that. You went in through the woods.
We found the fire exit.
And then proceeded to blow up half of the red brands hideout once you got there.
Hey, in our defense, we were left unsupervised.
Yes, it's true. If you do that, it really kind of streamlines what happens in part 3. Because once you've blown up the hideout, there are no logical hooks for you to do X and Y and Z after you've blown the hideout. Part 3 of the adventure is supposed to be you wandering around and questing and doing some odds and ends before ultimately you're directed to where Cragmaw Castle is.
Okay.
By the time everything is said and done, there really was only one thing that you could have done to find Cragmaw Castle, and that was go to Thunder Tree.
Okay. So there were side quests around the red branches?
Yeah. There were side quests in Act 2 and there were side quests in Act 3. And because of the way that the Goblin Cave was handled and that the Red Brands hideout was handled, you guys weren't eligible for any of that stuff.
What were we supposed to find in the hideout that was supposed to lead us?
getting rid of the red brands should have opened up NPC conversations where, oh, well, you still don't know, you know that Gundren Rockseeker and the map were taken to Cragmaw Castle, but you're still not entirely sure where Cragmaw Castle is.
Right.
There are a couple of different alternatives that you could have in order to find Cragmaw Castle. In order to find out where it was, you could go to Thundertree. There's a druid there that might know where Cragmaw Castle is. You could, there's something out in Coneybury that you could do where you would have, which was actually kind of sad. Something out in Coneybury, you end up running into Agatha the Banshee. For people that have read the Drizzt Do'Urden books, she crops up, I believe, in Streams of Silver.
I have no idea what Coneybury is because we did not go there.
No, we did not go to Coneybury. There were a couple of things that you could have done in the book that would have ultimately ushered you towards where Cragmaw Castle was. The only option that you guys ended up with, because of how everything socially was handled after burning down half of their hideout, was y'all got to go to Thundertree.
I made friends with the wolves.
It's true, you did make friends with the wolves.
They directed us there. Before we get too far into it, how... And I guess this would be a limitation of the writers. How... Obviously, there was a way that we were supposed to attack those two. Well, this area and then the other area that we shortcutted.
Yeah.
It seems that it would have been easy to block off the rear entrance that we kicked the door in and went in the back way.
Yep.
So, I guess, why did they do that? Or was there text in there for what to do if your players go in the outdoor?
No, crazily enough, the module was rather well constructed around finding the back door. Finding the back door to the Red Brand's hideout wasn't the problem. It was socially what had been done in the town.
Mm-hmm.
Socially what had been done in the town before you assaulted the.
Burning down the inn's a really bad idea. You lose out a lot of experience.
What you guys had done prior to taking the Red Brand's hideout out, and then what happened afterwards. It was the RP aspects of it were what limited it. And yes, I could have, as the DM, I could have weaved some kind of a yarn. This is the problem with RPing with intelligent people. If it was a bunch of novices, yes, I absolutely could have weaved something out of thin air. To make it plausible for you to have access to that other stuff. Mm-hmm. The problem is all of you are smart enough that if I begin to weave crap out of thin air in order to make it possible for you to do X and Y and Z, now I have to start keeping track of a lot of additional paperwork.
Sure.
And how is this going to affect the module 2 weeks down the line when we're someplace halfway across the map and you said we could do X and Y and Z, so this shouldn't be happening. And I
that changed.
Yeah.
No management.
And there was too much heavy lifting. Especially since, at that point we were early enough along in the adventure. DMing 5th Ed was still new to me.
Sure.
It was just, it was Hardic. I didn't want to court. To say nothing of the fact that I playing it the way we did was still in service to the story.
We still got through the story. You would think that if going in through that, I guess burning down the thing was really the big deal. So. How to stop your players from derailing a campaign. Lesson 1, don't let them burn down the tavern.
Yeah. The other thing, I tell you what, another big thing that happened, you guys ended up going to Thundertree, and the way that the Thundertree mechanic in Part 3 is supposed to work is you engage right off the druid, and you either directly ask him, can you take me to Wave Echo Cave? Which nobody ever did.
Because he seemed to be really rooted to that spot.
Yeah.
From a roleplay, it didn't seem like he was going to go anywhere until that Thunder Tree was cleansed.
It was, can you take me to Wave Echo Cave? In which case you would have said, yes, I can take you to Wave Echo Cave, but first you have to help me get rid of the dragon. Now, here's another part of the module that maybe was a little bit more poorly constructed than it should have been. Helping me get rid of the dragon. You guys are level 4.
We would have
at
been
this point.
3 or 4, depending on the side quest. We could have been level 3, given.
I want to say that you were level 4 because I leveled you to 5 after you defeated Kragmaw, because the end of Kragmaw is what rolls you directly into the final part of the book. So let's say you were level 4. 4 level 4 characters, and helping him deal with the green dragon that's in Thundertree constitutes the rules of that particular engagement with Venomfang the green dragon are get the dragon down to half of its hit points, and then the dragon will fly away. 4 level 4 characters or 5 level 4 characters,
And a druid of unknown.
and a druid of unknown anything. And the module is very, very specific that the druid doesn't really join you in that fight. He sends you off to do it himself.
That's not helping.
No, it's not. And that's another fight that, we went back when we did it. The question of can you take me to Wave Echo Cave never came up. So the question of can you help me get the dragon out of here never came up. Instead, Rydoth was simply asked, do you know where Kragmaw Castle was? He said, yeah, sure. He's more than willing to give you that information. So he gives you a generalized map to where that was, and then there was some really, really neat role play with you.
I talked to the wolves. I got in touch with nature.
Using a ritual. And had you all not gone to Thundertree, that would have been an excellent way to find your way to Thundertree on your own.
Kragmaw.
Yes, Kragmaw. Excuse me.
No problem.
That's one of the things that, again, for as loosey-goosey as this adventure is sometimes, if you're a storyteller, there are some ways that you can really recover the adventure kind of going off the rails and drive things back.
If you have barbarians who can talk to wolves.
Yeah, if you've got a barbarian who can talk, and that's one of the great things about role-playing with people who have done it for a little bit longer. You stop thinking about the blinders of this is what my character could do, and you really start thinking about interfacing with the world around you, and that's...
Dorvar has hidden depths.
Yes, Dorvar has hidden depths. That was one of the neater parts of the adventure, at least for me. An opportunity to, stretch the legs from a storytelling standpoint. But you guys never ran face first into the dragon at level 4, so you never had to worry about the dragon at level 4. This brings us to the fight in Kragmaw Castle. The combat in Kragmaw, based on how the module is written, you get the impression that it's supposed to have been handled more by stealth than everybody just kicking in the door and I'm all out of gum.
We did try to stealth for a little bit.
Yeah.
Then
that's the way that the module is written. The module kind of assumes that there'll be a little bit more stealth here, but how are you going to get through that whole castle while maintaining stealth?
When you're going to have at least one person in heavy armor.
Yeah, I mean, that was never going to succeed. Now, we took it a little bit over at that point. I mean, you guys went through Kragmaw Castle like a wrecking ball. And because you went through Kragmaw Castle like a wrecking ball, you stumbled onto one of the eventualities in the module that is really poorly written, which Gundren Rockseeker... there are a couple of different ways that discovering Gundren Rockseeker with Grok, or whatever his name was.
The Orc King or whatever.
The Orc King. Stumbling onto him and the doppelganger who was trying to get the map to the mines from him while Gundren was still alive. There were like 3 different ways that encounter could have worked out where you would have an opportunity to save Gundren's life. And find out where the map was and get to Wave Echo Cave, etc., etc. There were a couple of different ways that should have worked out. But because you guys went through Kragmaw Castle like a freaking wrecking ball, there's detailed instructions in the module about if the doppelganger hears that there's something going on, he will try to kill Grok and Gundren and find the map and just leave.
Right.
Well, you gave him enough time to kill Grok and Gundren, but then somebody went and released the owlbear, which, okay, fine. He's out. And you never end up finding out where the map is. Or he never ends up finding the map. So now, as players... you've got a dead Gundren and a map, which
And an owlbear skull.
you're in an owlbear skull. But the module doesn't really. Okay, so what happens if Gundren dies? If you stumble onto the adventure if you stumble onto that room while the doppelganger is negotiating with Grok the Orc King for
Gundren and the
for
map.
Gundren, it's like, okay, so now he has Gundren in a chokehold, and if anybody comes any closer, he'll kill Gundren. How are you supposed to resolve that?
Right.
That part of the adventure was just really, really in the module was really, really poorly written.
To use some killer persuasion rolls.
Yeah. And that leads into the fourth area of the map where
Once
the
again, we
module-
shortcutted it.
yeah, where the module is very, very specific about, at this point players should be at least level 4. If they're not level 4, they're going to find some parts of this dungeon really, really difficult. If they're level 4, they're going to find some parts of this dungeon really, really difficult. There were a lot of things about the last act of the adventure that I actually found really, really frustrating.
Besides the shortcutting that we did?
Yeah, besides the shortcutting, the map for the final area of this module looks like this. And what you're going to notice while you're looking at this map is, everything's been grid lined off. Now, unlike every other map in the module, the grid lines for this one represent 10 feet square and not 5 feet square. So you can't navigate with this, first and foremost. It's really, really difficult to transpose this map, first and foremost.
Did we scale that up when we made ours?
We had to find another image online where somebody had deliberately gone through, rescanned the image, removed the grid lines, and then re-implanted them at 5 feet instead of 10. Because if you're playing with miniatures, for the DMs that are out there, there are maps that you can find online of all of the different areas in this module where people have made them a little bit more high res and have put good grid lines on them so that you can print them out and actually move your miniatures around. The map for the Lost Mines of Phandelver is freaking huge. Once you actually scale everything up and have 5 foot 5 foot square tiles on it, for miniatures, it's, you're looking at 1 inch by 1 inch grid squares. When everything was said and done, we had the image upscaled. The image was something crazy, like 9 feet tall by 7.5 feet wide. Something absolutely enormous. Now, the way that we got around doing this is we got a really, really great image, and a friend of mine who did some photo editing, he made me a really, really good, big, clean image, and we ended up taking it to FedEx Kinko's. And they carved the image up into 11 by 17 sheets and printed those images up, and then we had these huge...
Tiled it.
Yeah, they just tiled the map, and so you're jockeying all these tiles around. But by the time everything was said and done, it was like seven rows of 11 by 17 paper, and each row consisted of 7 columns.
5, I think. I think
Was
it was
it 5?
5 down by 7 wide.
Might have been. Huge map. Very, very cumbersome, and I'm not sure how in the world you were supposed to do that otherwise. So not a whole lot of thought there. The other thing that was really, really frustrating about that area it was that there's a lot of just negative, useless space in that map where they could have drawn the thing differently. Somebody was clearly concerned with making a map and not how was somebody going to use that map when they drew it out.
Theater of the mind, people.
Yeah, very, very frustrating in that respect. The other thing about the map that was really, really irritating was
if you put your hand on the left wall.
Yeah, it was an unknown area, and the person who was in the lead said, "Okay, I'm going to put my hand on the left-hand wall, and we're just going to follow the left-hand wall, and eventually we will have explored everywhere inside of the mine." If you do that, you skip to the end.
I feel so bad about that.
There are 21 different individual areas inside of the mine where there's supposed to be events and combat. It's supposed to be a huge adventure. However,
we did 3 rooms before we got to the end?
There was only one scripted combat that you ran into before you got to the end. The other ones were randos. The one scripted combat was when you were in area 2, which was all those passages is where you ran into your first ogre jelly.
Yeah.
You killed him. Then there was a rando encounter a little bit later with the ghouls, just based off of rolling the dice because the mines aren't a safe place to be.
Right.
And then after that, you found the black spider, and that was the end encounter. That left probably 80% of the area unexplored.
It was. I felt bad for the DM. I
Yeah.
really did.
I had rolled up critters for like the other 80% of the mine that I thought they were going to go through before they finally got to the black spider, and they're like, "No, we're just going to skip to the end."
We didn't mean we were skipping to the end. We were just trying to map the place out.
Yeah, but the fact that you can do that, and this is not a reflection on
No.
you guys at all.
It was a bad design.
Yeah, it's a poorly built final area. So again, as a DM, you just need to be aware of the fact that you're going to have to play fast and loose with this if people decide to do it.
Or just take one little hallway. If you block that off, you can't do it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
rubble right here. Can't get through it. Nope, too bad. Go the other way.
Now there are some great storytelling opportunities with the Black Spider. There are a lot of different ways depending on how the adventure has been played up till this point where you can screw with your party members, and I heartily encourage you to do that. The great thing about Drow is it's really really difficult to know what they're if what they're saying is true or not. So there's a really really good opportunity there to sow discord, especially if they plan on going and doing other parts of the adventure after they're done with the Drow. Which we had to do because
We skipped to the end.
Yeah, the whole point of the adventure was finding this lost mine with a magical Googaw inside of it. We skipped to the end, we killed the end boss, but we still hadn't found the magical Googaw yet. So you go through and you explore the rest of the mine, which is when you stumble on things like the Spectator and the Wraith and the Flame Skull, all of which are actually more difficult to beat than the final boss.
But didn't have as many friends.
And you know, again, had you guys not been level 5, I think I would have eaten you alive.
Oh, yeah.
I think I absolutely would have eaten you alive.
Oh, yeah.
Repeatedly.
That second attack at level 5 is just such a huge difference maker for the Ranger and the Dorvor.
Yeah.
And third level spells for the Bard and the Cleric. And, yeah, level 5 is a big deal in D&D.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have.
Big things happen.
People not being level 5 in the final act of this game is a serious problem. You will have some frustration there. So really take some time and consider it if you're going to run this module through. All things considered, it wasn't a bad adventure to play at all. I had a great time playing it. I think everybody that played had a good time rolling through it. You just read the thing through. If people are level 4 by the time you go into the mines, you might
make sure they're level 5 by the time they come out.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough thing if you don't. It really really is. It's a tough thing if you don't. Now, after that, people knew that there was a dragon in Thunder Tree, and so some of the folks in our group kind of got a hard on about let's go and have an encounter with a dragon because it's Dungeons and Dragons. People want to.
It's a green dragon. It's close to areas of civilization. It made our poor ranger go pee-pee in our pants, and we needed to get some payback. And we wanted to pay back the druid who kind of helped us.
As a DM, if you do end up squaring off against the dragon, first and foremost,
Don't do it with dwarves in the party, because dwarves make his little poison breath go.
A couple of things about the encounter with the dragon. If you do the encounter with the dragon when it's scripted to happen, and you guys are level 3 or 4, maybe level 3 or 4,
Would have been tougher.
the dragon's going to eat your shit alive. He's absolutely going to eat your shit alive, especially if one of your characters happens to be a dwarf barbarian who is raging. That was one of the only reasons why you lasted as long as you did.
Oh, yeah.
When our party ended up squaring off against the dragon, it was after the campaign proper was finished. Everybody was level 5, because
Still a tough fight.
Because my this being my first run around, and I had played through the Storm King's Thunder as a participant and not the DM. I had played through a little bit of that, and not having magical weapons was a serious problem. Really, really was. And so I took some liberties and kind of opened up a little magical weapon Walmart at one point earlier on in the game, and made sure that everybody had magical weapons. Wanted everybody to have a good time. Probably overpowered my party. Now, as somebody who's played through a lot of different campaigns, you and I had discourse about this. Kevin Saugier, another friend of mine who we play with, we've had discourse about
He's supposed to be right here, but he chickened out.
And the general consensus was that by the time you guys left Magical Walmart, you were way OP.
We were a little OP.
For where you should have been. Now, knowing that I OP'd them, the mines were still a struggle on several different occasions at level 5, which should tell you something. When they wandered into the fight with the Green Dragon, they did it in a relatively controlled fashion, and it was still...
Oh, it was a fight. I think that for any DM running this, if it's level 3, 4 characters in Thunder Tree going to fight the dragon, the druid would have to help.
But there's no, and I would agree with that, there's no stat block for the druid.
Make a stat block for the druid. Shouldn't be that hard. It's in the DMG in the back, or the monster manual. One of the two has standard characters back there.
Yeah.
The druid would have to at least be there to buff, heal, and keep
Something.
the players in the fight.
Because otherwise the dragon would just rock and roll. The dragon would just rock and roll all over you. He really, really would.
We blew the top off a tower.
They did. You did blow the top off of the tower. The other thing to bear in mind if you're going to DM this adventure, especially if you're doing it for the first time, the encounter with the dragon's got to be memorable. It can't be just another run-in with a goblin or a kobold or whatever. It's a dragon. It's the title. It's a critter that's on the title card of the game. So there's a huge amount of opportunity here. There's a huge amount of opportunity here with Screw With People. Green dragons in particular. The green dragon that you run into in Thunder Tree is a young green dragon.
Not much longer.
That's a good thing for the people trying to square off against it, and probably why it's a young green dragon. Young dragons, period, are the only class of dragons other than hatchlings that don't get legendary actions and lair actions.
We would have been so dead.
If you're not sure what those are, go and Roll20 is a free resource online. Roll20.com, I think is what it is. Go and look up the stat block for a young green dragon versus an adult green dragon, and go look up lair actions, and go look up regional actions, and go look up legendary actions. Lair, regional, and legendary, those are 3 things that young dragons don't get that adult dragons do.
It's bad.
Which, again, their name is on the title card of the game, so of course they're going to roll-full stomp anything that they come up against. But it's still, in spite of the fact that they were level 5s, which, and took on the dragon after the fact, and they were loaded up with magical weapons that nobody should have had. Some crazy artifacts, some crazy armor, some crazy weapons.
I don't know if it was completely out of hand. I had a +2 weapon instead of a +1.
You had a +2 weapon, and then you had
the
a shield.
The shield, which did a little bit of DR, was nice, but it didn't help my armor class. So
yeah,
Dorvor had a little bit of a bump.
You were kind of a perfect storm with your barbarian.
Dorvor is perfect.
When it came time for the poison breath, you were
advantage on the roll because I'm a dwarf.
Yeah,
resistance on the roll because I'm a dwarf.
Yeah, you won the save on the poison roll.
Huge con.
So half damage, and then you've got racial resistance.
Yep.
So half damage.
Yep.
And then you've got a shield that automatically takes off 2 points of whatever damage after comes to you. So there's that. Now, that gets even more stupid if you're a barbarian who's taken Totem of the Bear, and you can start having any damage that comes at you anyway. So what should have been when I hit him with poison breath the first time, for various reasons I didn't roll 12d6. I only rolled 9.
40 points of damage.
I still sent 40 points, and it was a crap roll. I still sent 40 points of damage.
Dorvor took 8.
Yeah. So the dwarf made his con save, so 40 becomes 20. Then he's got racial resistances, so 20 becomes 10. Then you've got the shield that he's hanging on to, which pulls 10 damage down to 8. Had he been raging...
No, it wouldn't have stacked.
It wouldn't have stacked?
The resistances wouldn't have stacked.
Okay.
So it wouldn't have gotten down to 4.
So from 40 points of damage down to 8. That's... that's ridiculous.
Dorvor is mighty.
Yeah. Now, the bard who was sitting next to him, I did...
Not the dwarf.
I did ring his shit like a church bell.
He made his save, but
But again, these are level 5 characters with magical gewgaws, and I was being gentle with them. I still almost, and after this, the Barbarian wisely raged. Which, for the people that don't know, Rage gives you half damage on everything except for Psychic, and it increases, I think it increases your
Damage.
attack. That's an incredible thing to have. It really, really is, especially if your Barbarian is being backed up with, with other support classes with buffs and heals. It's a devastating class.
I tank all day and party all night.
He does indeed. And I still almost dropped the dwarf, the barbarian, and I wasn't rolling the dragon's breath the way that I should have been, because I didn't. You've beaten all the rest of the adventure, and now for shits and grins, we're going to go back and take a dragon on. I didn't want to kill everybody, and have that be the note that everything went out. So I didn't want to kill everybody. But in spite of all of that, I still very nearly ground the barbarian into a pulp.
It's the problem when you're the only person on the front line.
If I had been playing the dragon's breath weapon correctly, I think I would have killed you. I think I would have killed the bard, and after that, I think taking the ranger and the cleric down would have been a game of cat and mouse.
Yep.
But
that mouse hits hard though.
Indeed.
Goddamn ranger.
The way the adventure plays is once you get the dragon down to at least half of its hit points, you drive it away. This was difficult to do with a group with a good group of seasoned level 5 characters. You're not going to do that with level 3s. You're not going to do it with level 4s. So just be aware of that when you play the adventure. All things considered, especially having sampled some of the other modules, a good module for 5th Ed, a good module to have included in the starter kit. A lot of fun to DM, especially if you have good people.
I give it 4 stars. Would delve again.
If you're looking to get into 5th Ed, do pick up a starter kit. Do pick up the Lost Mines of Phandelver. If you're just looking for something new to do in 5th Ed, it's just a good, fun, all-around adventure to play. A little bit of additional research on the part of your DM.
Don't burn down the tavern.
Yeah, don't burn down the tavern. A little bit of additional research on the part of the DM if you want to make sure that you roll things through from end to end. But all things considered, not a bad way to go if you're looking to RP in D&D 5th edition again. Not a bad things to do. Running through Horde of the Dragon Queen right now. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching.
Hate that beach.